Everything in existence was once only an idea. The house you live in, the chair you sit on, the clothes you wear, all began as thoughts before they took form. The same principle applies to your life. Every event, circumstance, and condition you experience is a direct result of the thoughts and assumptions you persist in. The world you call reality is nothing but a shadow, cast by the light of your imagination. You are not bound by circumstances. You are not limited by past experiences. The only law governing your reality is the one dictated by your consciousness. The moment you grasp this truth, you hold the key to absolute freedom. If you desire a different life, you must first construct it within. There is no power outside of you shaping your destiny. There is only the power within you directing itself according to your dominant state of mind. What you consistently imagine and accept as true will be reflected in your external world. For imagination is the creative force behind all things. What you believe to be real persists. The unseen realm of imagination is the birthplace of everything visible. It is not wishful thinking. It is not idle fantasy. It is the fundamental law upon which the universe operates. You have been conditioned to believe that life happens to you, that you are at the mercy of external forces, but this is an illusion. Nothing happens by chance. Every circumstance is the result of a mental cause, whether known or unknown. The mind is always creating, whether consciously or unconsciously. Most people live unaware of this truth, allowing their imagination to be governed by fear, doubt, and limitation. And so their world reflects these states. Struggles appear endless, success seems distant, and desires remain unfulfilled. But the moment you assume control of your imagination, the moment you recognize that everything you experience originates from within, you begin to awaken to your creative power. Your imagination is the divine faculty through which reality takes form. The world responds not to what you wish, but to what you assume to be true. If you imagine yourself to be lacking, if you dwell in the state of failure, if you constantly affirm your struggles, then the world must mirror that state. You cannot escape the law, for it is always in motion. But if you assume yourself to be successful, if you persist in the belief that you already possess what you seek, then the world has no choice but to make it so. The law does not discriminate. It is impersonal. It simply reflects back to you the state of being in which you dwell. To create the life you desire, you must first live in the feeling of its reality. Do not wait for evidence. Do not look to the outside world for confirmation. The outer world is always a step behind the inner world. The process begins with you. If you wish to experience abundance, you must first become abundant in thought. If you wish to find love, you must first embody the feeling of being loved. If you wish to achieve success, you must first assume the consciousness of success. Imagination creates reality, not the other way around. Most people believe they must work hard, struggle, and chase after their desires. They exhaust themselves trying to force external changes, unaware that all change begins within. The moment you assume yourself to be what you desire, the unseen forces of the universe begin to shift. Circumstances align, opportunities present themselves, and events unfold in ways you could not have predicted. But these are not coincidences. They are the natural outcome of the law. The world bends to accommodate your assumptions, for it is nothing more than a reflection of your state of consciousness. Doubt is the only barrier to manifestation. The moment you entertain doubt, you undo the work of imagination. You must remain unwavering in your assumption, regardless of what the outer world appears to be. The greatest mistake is to look at present conditions and allow them to dictate what is possible. What you see now is only the result of past assumptions. If you wish to change it, you must shift your state of being. Persist in the new assumption, and the outer world will conform. It has no choice, for it is only the shadow cast by your inner reality you are always imagining. Every moment of your life, You are either creating consciously or unconsciously. Most people allow their imagination to be controlled by their environment. They react to circumstances instead of directing them. But the one who understands this law knows that external reality is secondary. It is not the cause, it is the effect. The true cause is within, and once this is realized, nothing remains impossible. When you grasp this truth, you no longer beg for change, you assume it. You no longer hope for better conditions, you embody them. You do not ask when your desires will manifest. You know that they already exist in the unseen and are merely waiting for your acceptance. The moment you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, it begins to externalize itself in ways beyond logic, beyond reason, beyond anything the physical mind can comprehend. The world has trained you to believe in limitations. It has taught you to accept struggle as necessary, to believe that time must pass before your desires can be realized. But this is a deception. The only time that exists is now. Your future is not something you move toward, it is something you create in this very moment. If you persist in an assumption long enough, it becomes your reality. The law is absolute. There is no chance, no luck, no external force governing your fate. There is only your imagination, shaping your experience according to what you accept as true. There is no greater power than the power within you. You do not need permission, nor approval, nor external validation. You need only to assume the state of the wish fulfilled and persist in that assumption until it hardens into fact. This is the key to transformation. This is the secret to creating the life you desire. And once you truly understand this, the world must bow to your will, for it is only the reflection of your imagination. Everything you desire already exists. The life you long for, the success you seek, the love you yearn to experience. None of these are distant possibilities, waiting for time to unfold them. They exist now in the unseen reality of imagination, but you cannot reach them by striving, by hoping, or by waiting. You must assume them to be true in the present moment. You must live in the end, not in the process. Most people live their lives bound by external conditions. They believe they must first see evidence before they can believe in a new reality. They wait for their circumstances to change before they allow themselves to feel successful, loved, or abundant. But this is the great misunderstanding. The world is not the cause, it is the effect. The outer world is always a reflection of the inner state. If you live in the process, if you keep looking at what is, measuring progress, waiting for a future event to confirm your desires, then you remain trapped in the cycle of waiting. But the moment you assume that you already are what you seek to become, the transformation begins. There is no need to force, to struggle, or to manipulate circumstances. The only work required is the inner shift of assumption. You must enter the state of your fulfilled desire and dwell in it, not as an observer, but as one who already possesses it. Walk as if the world has already rearranged itself in your favor. Speak as if your success is undeniable. Feel as if your desires have been realized, and let that feeling guide every action you take. The moment you fully accept your new state, the world will respond to reflect it. Imagination is the only reality. What you entertain in your mind with feeling and persistence must externalize itself in your world. This is not a philosophy, it is law. There is no exception to it. Every experience you have ever known was first imagined, whether consciously or unconsciously. You are always assuming something to be true about yourself. Most people assume lack, struggle, and limitation because they believe in what their senses show them. They reinforce the very conditions they wish to escape because they accept the outer world as real and imagination as fantasy. But the truth is the opposite. The outer world is the illusion. It is only the crystallization of past thoughts and assumptions. If you wish to change it, you must stop giving it power and shift your awareness to a higher state. To live in the end means to abandon all thoughts of how and when. It means to see yourself already in possession of that which you seek and to act from that place of certainty. Do not confuse this with wishing or daydreaming. To wish is to acknowledge that you do not yet have. To hope is to affirm separation, but to assume is to create. The one who assumes is the one who knows, and the one who knows does not question, does not doubt, does not wait for external proof. He simply moves in the world with the confidence that all things are already his. Doubt is the great destroyer of manifestation. The moment you question whether your assumption is real, you invite delay. You are not here to hope for better conditions, you are here to declare them into existence. The only requirement is persistence. Do not let appearances deceive you. What is seen is only the echo of what was once assumed. It has no power except the power you give it. If you desire health, assume perfect health, even in the presence of illness. If you desire wealth, assume financial abundance, even when circumstances suggest otherwise. Do not entertain thoughts of lack. Do not measure progress by what your eyes can see. The law is infallible. If you dwell in the end, the means will be provided. People ask, but how will it happen? That is not your concern. The conscious mind, limited as it is, cannot predict the infinite ways in which reality shapes itself to match your assumption. Your only task is to persist in the state of the wish fulfilled. The moment you claim it in consciousness, unseen forces begin to move. The world bends, circumstances shift, opportunities arise, all to bring about the fulfillment of what you have assumed to be true. It may seem miraculous to those who do not understand, but to the one who lives by this law, it is the natural order of things. You do not attract what you want. You become what you are. And what you are is determined by the state in which you dwell. If you constantly look to the future for your desires to materialize, you are affirming that they do not yet exist. And if you affirm that they do not exist, then they cannot come to pass. But if you shift your awareness and dwell in the state of fulfillment now, then the world has no choice but to reflect that state. You may think you are waiting for the right conditions, the right opportunity, or the right time, but in truth, the only thing waiting is your assumption. The moment you assume it as real, the moment you step into the version of yourself that already has it, reality must conform. The unseen becomes seen. The impossible becomes inevitable. The delay was never in the world. It was only in your mind. Persist even when the senses argue otherwise. Remain faithful to the end you have chosen. Let every thought, every action, and every feeling be aligned with the assumption that it is already done. Refuse to entertain contradiction. Do not seek validation from the world. Seek it only from within. Live in the end and the world will follow. The greatest secret of creation is that you do not manifest what you want. You manifest what you are conscious of being. Your life is nothing more than a reflection of the state in which you dwell. There is no outside force determining your fate, no external hand shaping your future. The only reality is consciousness, and the state you occupy dictates the experiences you encounter. If you wish to change your life, you must first change your state of being. Most people believe they must work tirelessly, struggle endlessly, and fight against the current of life to achieve their desires. They measure progress by effort, assuming that external action alone determines success. But this is an illusion. The outer world is only a mirror. It does not create. It only reflects. Your circumstances are the direct outpicturing of your internal state. If you desire something, yet persist in the state of not having it, then you reinforce its absence. You cannot long for something while simultaneously believing in its lack. The law is precise. You can only experience that which you first become. To assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to move into the state of already having that which you seek. It is not enough to think about it, to dream of it, or to hope for it. You must dwell in it. You must enter the state so completely that it becomes your present reality, even before the world has caught up to reflect it. The moment you accept it as true in imagination, it must externalize itself in the physical realm. The world does not respond to empty wishes or fleeting desires. It responds only to conviction. The one who is convinced of his success, despite all evidence to the contrary, will find that success must come. The one who feels wealthy, even in the presence of lack, will see wealth manifest in ways he could never have orchestrated. The law does not operate based on effort or struggle. It operates based on assumption. What you assume to be true with feeling and persistence will harden into fact. There is no power in hoping. Hope suggests doubt, and doubt is the great destroyer of creation. The mind that hopes is the mind that does not believe. But the one who knows, the one who assumes his desire as already his, does not waver. He does not question how it will come to pass. He does not look to the world for signs or confirmations. He simply lives as though it were already so. And because he has assumed it, it must be so. The world has taught you that you must see to believe, but the truth is that you must first believe before you can see. Your senses are not the authority, they are merely the reflection. If you live by what your eyes show you, you will remain bound to the conditions of the past. But if you learn to close your eyes to what is and open them to what can be, then you will reshape the world in the image of your desire. The unseen is the real. The seen is only its shadow. You are always in a state, whether by conscious choice or by unconscious habit. Every moment of your life, you are occupying a state of being, and that state is shaping your experience. If you wake each day feeling powerless, the world will reflect situations that reinforce that powerlessness. If you believe yourself to be unworthy, you will attract circumstances that affirm that belief. But if you shift your state, if you begin to assume the reality of your desire, the world must conform. It has no choice, for it is only the outpicturing of your consciousness. There is no effort in this, only awareness. You do not need to force change. You need only to assume it. The act of assuming is not a mere daydream, not a passing thought. It is a deep felt reality. The moment you claim it as yours, the unseen forces of creation begin to move. People, circumstances, and events will rearrange themselves to reflect your new state. You may not see how, and you do not need to. Your only concern is to remain faithful to the assumption. Most people fail because they allow the outer world to dictate their inner state. They assume success for a moment, but when they see no immediate evidence, they return to their old beliefs of doubt and struggle. But the one who understands this law remains unwavering. He does not let the present moment deceive him, for he knows it is only the reflection of past thoughts. He remains fixed in the state of his desire, knowing that persistence is the key. To shift your state is to shift your life. There is no need to ask when or how, for the state itself determines the means. You do not need to force opportunities to come. They will come naturally, as the inevitable expression of your assumption. The only question is, what are you assuming now? What are you accepting as true in this moment? For that and that alone is shaping your destiny. There is no waiting. The moment you assume your desire as present fact, it begins to crystallize into form. It does not take time, it only takes acceptance. The world cannot delay that which has already been claimed in imagination. The only delay is in the mind that doubts, the mind that wavers between states. But the mind that remains firm in its assumption will see its desire externalized with certainty. You do not become what you want, you become what you are. And what you are is determined by the state in which you dwell. Shift the state and you shift the world. Accept it as real now and the world will follow. This is the law and it cannot fail. Everything in your life is an expression of your assumption. There is no accident, no chance, no fate imposed upon you by an outside force. The life you experience is a direct reflection of the state in which you persist. You do not need to wait for a distant future, nor do you need to hope that circumstances will align in your favor. The moment you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, It is already accomplished. The world may not yet reveal it to your senses, but that is of no importance. What exists in imagination must solidify into form, for imagination is the only creative power. Most people believe they must earn their desires through effort, through struggle, through external force. They toil, they push, they seek validation from the world, never realizing that the world is only the mirror. It does not create, it only reflects. And if it reflects what is assumed within, then the only work required is to assume correctly. The mind that remains in lack sees only lack. The one who assumes wealth, health, or happiness as his present reality, even in the face of contrary evidence, will inevitably see it appear. The world has no choice but to reflect that which is consistently assumed. There is a power in conviction that transcends all seeming obstacles. The moment you fully accept a state as true, the entire universe moves to bring it into being. People, events, and circumstances are drawn into alignment with that which you have assumed. This is not theory, it is law. Every great achievement, every transformation, every success has first been claimed in consciousness before it was realized in form. If you wish to see change, you must stop looking at what is and begin to live from what can be. The greatest limitation is the belief in time. People say, one day I will have what I seek. And by that very statement, they push it further away. To say I will have is to affirm I do not have. To desire from a place of longing is to reinforce the state of absence. But to assume the wish fulfilled, to dwell in the feeling of already being that which you seek, is to bring it into immediate existence. Time does not create, assumption does. And the moment you assume it, the world must rearrange itself to make it so. It is not enough to think about your desire. Thought alone has no power unless it is felt. Feeling is the secret. To feel the reality of your assumption is to impress it upon the subconscious, and once impressed, it must externalize. The mind that merely wishes, that merely hopes, does not create. But the mind that feels its assumption as already real, that lives from that state as if it were an undeniable truth, is the mind that shapes reality. Doubt is the great thief of manifestation. The one who doubts wavers between states, never fully committing to either. He assumes his desire one moment and then questions it the next. And because he does not remain faithful to his assumption, the world reflects his indecision. But the one who knows, the one who assumes with unwavering certainty, does not look to the world for validation. He does not seek proof, for he understands that the proof will come only after the assumption has been made. He walks with confidence, knowing that what is real in imagination must become real in form. It does not matter what your senses tell you. If you accept your current reality as unchangeable, you are binding yourself to it. But if you close your eyes to appearances and open them to possibility, if you assume the feeling of your wish fulfilled, then you have already set the process in motion. The world is only the crystallization of past assumptions. What you see today is merely the echo of what was once believed. And if you wish to change it, you must abandon all thought of what is and shift fully into what you choose to be. There is nothing outside of you. The external world has no power except that which you give it. If you react to circumstances, you are allowing them to dictate your state. But if you dictate your state, the circumstances must conform. The one who lives from his assumption does not concern himself with how it will unfold. He does not force, he does not struggle, he simply accepts. And by acceptance alone, he calls it into being. You may believe that action is required, that effort is necessary to bring about change. But action, when taken from a state of lack, only reinforces that lack. The only action that matters is the assumption itself. Assume first, and let action be the natural expression of that state. If you assume success, your actions will naturally align with that assumption. If you assume love, your interactions will reflect that love. But if you act from a place of doubt, from a place of hoping rather than knowing, then your actions are futile. There is no need to force reality into submission. You are not here to fight against conditions, but to transcend them. The moment you persist in an assumption, refusing to be swayed by appearances, reality has no choice but to align. It may come in ways you cannot predict, through paths you did not foresee, but it will come. The only requirement is persistence. Assume it fully. Live from it now. The world is only a reflection of what you accept as true. Change your assumption, and you change your life. There is only one true reality, and it is the reality you accept within yourself. The world you experience is nothing more than a projection of your internal state. If you believe yourself to be small, the world will present to you evidence of your insignificance. If you believe yourself to be powerless, the world will shape itself in such a way that you are constantly reminded of your helplessness. But the moment you change your concept of self, the moment you assume the identity of one who already possesses that which he seeks, the world must shift to accommodate this new state. It is not enough to wish for something. Wishing implies separation. It suggests that what you seek is distant, outside of you, beyond your grasp. And as long as you perceive your desire in this way, you will remain apart from it. You do not move toward your desire. Your desire moves toward you the moment you claim it as yours. The key is in assumption. To assume the state of already having that which you seek is to make it an inevitability. It is to live in the consciousness of your wish fulfilled, knowing that it must externalize itself in due time. The mind that understands this truth does not beg, does not hope, does not look to the world for signs of confirmation. Instead, it rests in the certainty that what is imagined and felt with conviction must come to pass. The world is not separate from you. It is not something you must struggle against or manipulate into submission. It is only an obedient mirror, reflecting the assumptions you hold. Change the assumption and the reflection must change. Most people believe they must do something to bring their desires into being. They believe that effort, struggle, and action are the necessary ingredients for change. But action without assumption is meaningless. Action taken from a place of lack only reinforces that lack. The one who acts while still believing in his deficiency finds that no matter how much he does, he remains trapped in the same cycle. But the one who first assumes the state of his wish fulfilled, who acts only as an expression of that new state, finds that his efforts are effortless, his actions inspired, his results inevitable. There is no external force holding you back. There is no opposition greater than your own self-concept. You are always free to assume a new state. But the habit of dwelling in limitation keeps many bound. They believe in conditions. They believe in effort. They believe that change must take time. But time itself is an illusion. The only time that matters is now. And in this very moment, you are free to claim yourself as you wish to be. The senses deceive. They show you only what has already been assumed in the past. If you allow your senses to dictate your assumptions, you will remain trapped in a cycle of repetition, forever reacting to the world rather than shaping it. But the one who understands that assumption precedes experience knows that he is not bound by appearances. He can look beyond what is and see what will be, for he has already accepted it as done. Most people wait for circumstances to change before they allow themselves to feel differently. They say, when I have wealth, I will feel abundant. When I find love, I will feel complete. When I am successful, I will feel confident. But they have reversed the order of creation. It is not the world that changes first. It is the inner state that must shift. You do not wait for proof to believe. You believe first and the proof follows. This is the great secret that few understand. Feeling is the key, not idle daydreams, not passing thoughts, but deep, unwavering feeling. To assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to set the process in motion. The subconscious mind does not differentiate between what is real and what is imagined. It only accepts what is felt as true, and what is accepted on that level must materialize in the world of form. Doubt is the destroyer of creation. The moment you question, the moment you entertain disbelief, you disrupt the process. Many assume their desires for a fleeting moment, but then return to their old patterns of thinking, their old self-concept, and wonder why nothing changes. The one who truly understands this principle does not allow himself to waver. He assumes his new state and remains faithful to it, regardless of what the outer world presents. If you desire to see a change in your world, begin by changing the way you see yourself. Assume that you are already the person you wish to be. Do not wait for evidence. Do not seek validation. Simply live from that new state. Speak as though it were true. Think as though it were true. Feel as though it were true. And in doing so, you command the world to reflect it. The law is exact. It does not fail. The only question is whether you will remain steadfast in your assumption or allow yourself to be swayed by appearances. You do not need to force anything into being. You do not need to beg or struggle. You need only assume. An assumption, when felt deeply, when accepted fully, is creation. The moment you live in the feeling of already having, already being, already knowing, the unseen forces of reality move to bring it forth. The world will shift, circumstances will change, and what was once only imagined will become undeniable fact. The only work required is to persist in the assumption, unwavering, until the world has no choice but to conform. There is nothing to change but self. The external world, with all its seeming solidity, is but a shadow cast by the assumptions held within. Man looks outward, seeking to reshape the world through effort and struggle, never realizing that all change begins in the unseen realm of consciousness. The world is not separate from the mind that perceives it. It is a perfect reflection of the beliefs impressed upon the subconscious. If one wishes to see a different reflection, there is no need to fight against what appears. There is only the need to assume a new state of being and persist in that assumption until it hardens into fact. To believe that conditions dictate one's state is to be enslaved by appearances. The senses report only what has already been assumed, yet man foolishly believes that his circumstances are imposed upon him by external forces. He sees limitation, and so he accepts limitation. He sees lack, and so he assumes lack. But the wise know that all things are states of consciousness externalized, and that to change the world one need only assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled. The moment one does this, reality is set into motion to bring about its inevitable manifestation. Man's greatest mistake is to react to the world as though it is something separate from himself. He allows circumstances to dictate his emotions, believing that his feelings are mere reactions to external events. Yet in truth, it is his feelings that shape the world he sees. The one who remains unmoved by appearances, who holds steadfast to his assumption in the face of all seeming opposition, is the one who understands the law. He knows that what appears now is nothing more than a remnant of past beliefs, and that by assuming a new state, he is setting the stage for a new reality to unfold. Most people live bound by the evidence of their senses, accepting what is as though it were an unchangeable fact. They see debt and assume poverty. They see loneliness and assume separation. They see failure and assume defeat. But the one who understands that reality is the outpicturing of assumption does not allow himself to be deceived by appearances. He knows that what he accepts within himself must become his experience, and so he lives in the conviction of the unseen. The law is precise. It does not waver, nor does it fail. That which is assumed with feeling must come to pass, for the world has no choice but to conform to the deeply held convictions of the individual. Yet man, in his ignorance, assumes both his desires and his doubts, never realizing that by entertaining conflicting states, he delays the manifestation of his wish. The one who assumes a state with unwavering faith refusing to indulge in thoughts of failure or impossibility, is the one who will see his desires take form. It is not enough to wish, to hope, or to long for a change. Wishing implies that one does not already possess. Hoping suggests uncertainty. Longing acknowledges separation. The only way to bring about a change is to assume that the change has already occurred. This is not a matter of pretending, nor is it an exercise in wishful thinking. It is a fundamental shift in consciousness, a movement into the state of already being the one you desire to be. When this shift occurs, the world must rearrange itself to reflect the new assumption. Doubt is the only barrier between man and his desire. The moment one questions, the moment one looks to the outer world for validation, the creative power is interrupted. Faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. To believe before the evidence appears is to exercise true power. The one who waits for proof will remain waiting, for he has placed his faith in appearances rather than in the unseen reality of his assumption. But the one who assumes with certainty, who remains steadfast in his conviction, will see his assumption externalized in due time. It does not matter what the world presents to the senses. It does not matter what logic dictates or what others may say. The only thing that matters is the state in which one dwells. To dwell in the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to invite its realization. Every great accomplishment, every miraculous transformation has first been claimed in consciousness before it was witnessed in form. There is no exception to this law. Those who understand it and apply it with discipline shape their reality at will, while those who remain ignorant of it continue to be shaped by the conditions they refuse to transcend. The moment one stops reacting to the world and begins to act from the certainty of his assumption, he steps into his true creative power. He does not allow circumstances to dictate his state. Instead, he dictates circumstances by the state in which he abides. This is the only path to true freedom. Man is not bound by the conditions of his life, but only by the concepts he holds of himself. The world is malleable, subject to the impressions made upon it by the individual's inner state. Change the assumption, and the world must follow. There is no need to force, no need to struggle, only the need to persist in the assumption until it becomes reality. Everything begins and ends within the mind. The world that appears so solid, so unyielding, is nothing but the crystallized reflection of inner belief. The illusion of separation, the belief that the external world holds power over the individual, is the great deception that keeps man bound. He looks outward for confirmation of his desires, waiting for signs, waiting for proof, waiting for something outside of himself to shift before he allows himself to believe. Yet he does not realize that the very act of waiting confirms his disbelief. To wait is to confess that one does not already possess. And in this confession, the power of creation is forfeited. The only way to bring forth the unseen into the seen is to claim it now, in the present moment, with the full conviction that it is already so. The moment an individual accepts something as true, regardless of outward appearances, reality begins its inevitable course toward fulfillment. The world is not an independent force acting upon the individual. It is an obedient servant, reflecting back precisely what has been impressed upon it. This is the great truth that so few understand. What is held within must manifest without. There is no other possibility. The mind that knows this truth does not look to the senses for validation. The senses are deceptive, for they show only what has already been accepted in consciousness. To rely on them is to remain trapped in an endless cycle of reaction, forever bound by the evidence of past assumptions. But the one who understands that assumption precedes experience lives from the unseen reality, knowing that the world must conform in time. He does not waver, does not question, does not look for proof. He simply abides in the certainty that what he has assumed is already his. Most people believe in effort, in struggle, in hard work as the means to bring about change. They push against circumstances, fight against conditions, and believe that force is necessary to create. Yet they do not realize that all such effort is futile when it is born from a state of lack. To work from a place of deficiency is to reinforce that deficiency. No amount of action taken from a state of doubt will ever produce the desired result. The only action that bears fruit is that which is inspired by a consciousness already in possession of its desire. When one truly assumes the feeling of the wish fulfilled, action becomes effortless. There is no struggle, no tension, no force, only the natural unfolding of that which has already been accepted within. To assume a state is not to pretend, nor is it to engage in idle fantasy. It is a fundamental shift in identity, a movement in consciousness from one state to another. The world does not recognize what one merely wishes to be. It recognizes only what one truly believes himself to be. The man who believes himself to be poor, yet wishes to be wealthy, remains in poverty, for his wish is an acknowledgement of his lack. But the man who assumes wealth, who abides in the feeling of already possessing, will find that the world must bring forth the evidence of his new state. This law is absolute. It does not waver, nor does it fail. It is not a question of whether it works. It is always working. The only question is whether the individual is aware of how he is using it. Most use it unconsciously, assuming states of limitation, lack, and failure, and thus experiencing those conditions in their world. Yet the moment one becomes conscious of the process, the moment one deliberately assumes a new state and persists in it, everything begins to shift. The world which once seemed so fixed, so immovable, bends to the will of the one who understands this law. To assume the state of the wish fulfilled is to act as though it were already a fact. It is to think from the end rather than of the end. The difference is subtle, yet profound. To think of something is to place it in the realm of possibility, always just out of reach. But to think from something is to claim it as already real, to make it the foundation from which all thought and action arise. This is the secret known to all who have transformed their lives. They do not wish for change. They live as though the change has already occurred, and in doing so, they compel the world to conform. There is no power outside of the individual shaping his destiny. There is no fate, no luck, no external force determining what he may or may not have. There is only assumption, and assumption hardens into fact. The man who accepts this truth no longer waits for circumstances to change. He changes his assumptions, knowing that reality must follow. He does not seek approval from others, nor does he require validation. His inner conviction is enough, for he understands that all things begin in the unseen before they are made visible. The mind that understands this law no longer fears the future, no longer questions whether his desires will be realized. He knows they are already his, for he has claimed them in consciousness, and because he has claimed them, they must come to pass. The world is only a reflection, an obedient mirror, that takes the shape of what is impressed upon it. Change the assumption and the reflection must change. There is no exception to this law. It is the great principle upon which all creation rests, and those who master it shape their world with certainty, knowing that there is nothing to change but self. The world is a mirror, reflecting faithfully that which is impressed upon it by the individual's own state of consciousness. It does not act independently, nor does it impose conditions upon man. Rather, it reveals with perfect accuracy the assumptions that have been accepted as true. There is no outside force determining the circumstances of life, only the reflections of deeply held beliefs. To look upon the world and claim to be a victim of circumstance is to misunderstand the nature of reality. The only reality is that which is assumed, for assumption is the force that shapes the unseen into the seen, the intangible into the tangible. Man often believes that change occurs through effort, through action, through external manipulation of conditions. He believes that if only he could work harder, push more, strive with greater intensity, he could achieve his desires. But he does not realize that action alone, divorced from the right assumption, is powerless. No amount of effort will bring about a result contrary to the state in which one abides. The external world is but an echo, a shadow cast by the inner world. To chase after the shadow, to attempt to alter it directly, is an exercise in futility. True change occurs not by struggling against appearances, but by altering the cause, the assumption that brought them forth. All that is required to transform one's life is a change in consciousness. To occupy the state of one's wish fulfilled is to summon into experience the reality that corresponds to that state. The moment an individual adopts a new assumption, the world begins its rearrangement to make that assumption real. It is not a question of whether this will happen. It must happen, for it is law. The world is not capricious, nor is it ruled by chance. It is the precise reflection of the individual's state of being. The one who grasps this truth is freed from the illusion of randomness and begins to take deliberate control of his life. Yet, despite the simplicity of this truth, many find it difficult to accept. They look to the world for confirmation before they dare to believe, not realizing that this very act of waiting for proof denies them the fulfillment of their desire. To seek validation from the senses is to confess unbelief. The only proof that is needed is the conviction within. For once an assumption is accepted as true, the world has no choice but to conform. The wise do not wait for evidence. They create it by assuming it already exists. The mind that understands this does not waver. It does not look to the outside world for reassurance, nor does it allow present conditions to dictate its beliefs. It holds steadfastly to the assumption that the desire is already fulfilled. No matter what appears, no matter what others may say, no matter how impossible the situation may seem, it remains unwavering in its conviction, for it knows that what is assumed with persistence must be made real. The moment one falters, the moment one questions, the moment one allows doubt to enter, the creative power is disrupted. It is not that the law has failed, but rather that the individual has failed to remain faithful to his assumption. Faith is not a passive hope, it is an active certainty. To assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled is to abandon all doubt, to act, think, and feel as though the desired state is already a fact. It is to so fully identify with the new reality that the old is no longer considered. Those who practice this with discipline see miracles. For what the world calls miracles are nothing more than the natural result of assumed truths becoming externalized. There is no mystery to this, no secret hidden from the few. It is available to all who are willing to use it. The great error is to believe that one must first see before he can believe. The senses report only what has already been impressed upon them by past assumptions. To rely on them is to live in a world of effects, never addressing the cause. The wise man turns inward, knowing that the only thing that requires change is his own state of consciousness. The moment he accepts a new assumption as true, the outer world has no choice but to reflect it. There is no exception to this law. It does not discriminate, nor does it fail. It is as certain as the rising of the sun. To assume a state and persist in it is to make it real. The only requirement is unwavering faith in the unseen, a conviction so strong that no external circumstance can shake it. Those who understand this principle and apply it with precision are no longer at the mercy of fate. They become masters of their reality, knowing that all change begins and ends within. There is nothing to change but self, and when self is changed, the world must follow. The truth has always been simple, yet so few truly grasp it. The world is nothing but a reflection of what is held within. The external is powerless to dictate the course of one's life unless permission is granted through belief. Every circumstance, every event, every experience is but the result of an assumed state, whether consciously or unconsciously chosen. The great secret, then, is not in the struggle, not in the effort, but in the quiet mastery of assumption. To live as though the wish is already fulfilled is to step beyond the illusion of separation and recognize that creation is complete. There is no waiting, no hoping, no pleading for things to change. There is only the unwavering acceptance that the change has already occurred. The one who abides in this truth does not look for signs, does not question the process, does not allow doubt to enter. He knows that what is impressed upon the mind must be expressed in the world, and so he moves with absolute confidence, untouched by appearances. There is no greater power than the ability to assume a state and persist in it. Those who wield this understanding cease to be victims of circumstance and become the deliberate architects of their reality. They do not seek permission from the world to be who they wish to be. They claim it boldly, knowing that assumption always hardens into fact. The invitation is always open. The choice is always present. One may continue to live in reaction to the world, bound by what has already been assumed, or one may take conscious control, deliberately selecting the reality they wish to experience. The law does not waver. It is not sometimes true. It is always true. And those who embrace it with full conviction will find that life bends to their will, for there is nothing to change but self. And in changing self, the entire world must follow.